Hello and welcome. I am joined by our Vice President of Research and Development, Dr. Diana Howard, today. Really great to have you with us, Diana. Dr. Diana Howard is responsible for research and development of pretty much all our products. By that I mean the Dermalogica products that you are of course familiar with, but also our educational product. How we take all of our research and development knowledge and make that an educational format that is available in 51 countries around the world, wherever we teach, and in all 40 international dermal institutes. So Dr. Diana Howard is the master of the keys, if you want. We've worked together for over 15 years since Dr. Howard has been with Dermalogica. She has her PhD from UCLA in plant biochemistry. So there's no one better, really, to talk to us today about subjects and topics that you've asked that we address. And what we're going to talk about today is skin brightening versus skin lightening. Now those are two words that are often used interchangeably, but they're quite different. And they're different, I think, physiologically, but they're also different legally, aren't they, Diana? Because skin brightening versus skin lightening, when I travel around the world as you do, you often see skin lighteners. What does that really mean? Right. And is that different than a skin brightener, which we talk about when we talk about Chroma White TRX? So what is the difference between that?
The truth of the matter is, it's really all comes down to legal issues.
Right.
You know, is a whitener or a brightener or a lightener different? No, really, they're all to address one problem, and that's hyperpigmentation. The problem is, in the United States, and Dermalogica being a US-based corporation, we have to be in 100% compliance with US regulations. And the category of skin whiteners or lighteners, they can be used synonymously, falls under the United States Food and Drug Administration's over-the-counter drug category. These are not cosmetics. These are over-the-counter drugs. As such, they must be in compliance with a monograph that the government issues, the US FDA issues. They state in this monograph on skin whiteners or lighteners, there is only one approved authorized agent for lightening the skin, and that is hydroquinone.
Which we discussed in a previous podcast. Please check that out if you missed it. Go onto the Business Center at dermalogica.com and check out our previous podcast where we actually specifically addressed hydroquinone and the safety issues with that ingredient. I mean, we had hydroquinone at 2% in our product called Superfade 15 years ago, and when you first joined us, that was one of your first things. We have to remove this product from the lineup because hydroquinone's not safe. It's banned pretty much everywhere else.
As a matter of fact, just this recent year in the Global Cosmetic Industry Trade magazine, I wrote an article, and it's in our Business Center, and the title is "When the Cure is Worse Than the Problem." And I go through in detail all the issues associated with the safety concerns on hydroquinone, so that they have access to as well if they want to download that.
So to use the word lightener, that really applies to an over-the-counter medication, an OTC as we call it, with hydroquinone.
Correct.
So we use the term brightener to apply to everything else.
About right at the time this happened, where people were shying away from hydroquinone, there was a movement of how do we address this problem of pigmentation and skirt the issue is really what it came down to. And so some very
compliance and yet address the problem.
And one of the things that came about is marketers realized that the public knew that brightening could be equated to lightening and whitening without the cosmetic companies calling them lighteners and whiteners, which then means they are drugs and they can only use hydroquinone. So if you wanted to go down the road of using an alternative, which we did at Dermalogica, you had to skirt the issue. And the way companies have skirted the issue have been to refer to them as brighteners. And
but addressing the same problem.
Same problem. And so there's this whole arsenal now of brighteners on the market. And it's actually quite fascinating because it's one of the subjects I'm so passionate about. I love researching pigmentation. We have at the International Dermal Institute, as you know, a 3-hour very advanced course on pigmentation and hyperpigmentation. What we have done is we have followed and we've worked very closely with pharmaceutical companies, in particular in Asia, to develop these alternative systems that are brightening agents. And one of the things, as you know, we've incorporated in Dermalogica, the only one to have it in any product, is the oligopeptide 34, which is one of the most effective brighteners.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen the results with Chroma White TRX. We were fortunate enough, of course, to road test the product before we launched it and saw immediate results. We had results with people here at Dermalogica within 2 weeks on sun-damaged, pigmentation caused from sun damage. With your background in plant biochemistry, your qualification, your doctorate in plant biochemistry, Diana, what are the sort of advances, what are the ways in which the botanical extracts and the peptides and all of the newer cosmeceutical ingredients, how are they addressing pigmentation that's maybe a little different, a little more advanced?
That's what's really exciting to me as a biochemist, because up till 5 years ago, all we had in our capability as cosmetic formulators was to address the tyrosinase enzyme. That was step 1 and 2 in the multi-stepped whole process of making pigment. We now have about 6, 7 different sites of attack that we can go after. And that's what we've been focusing on with these alternatives. Some of these, like the glabridin, the active fraction in licorice, it competes with the enzyme on the substrate. So it binds up the enzyme so that the tyrosine, the amino acid that leads to pigmentation, cannot bind with that enzyme. So we stop it there. We use niacinamide and glucosamine that prevents the transfer of the newly formed melanosome to the adjacent cell. We are going after it in so many different points or targeted points and sites in the whole process of pigmentation. And that's what's so fascinating, is because these alternative brighteners are really zeroing in on places that we didn't really know we had capability of controlling. So it's a whole new area has opened up in the last 5 years.
It's a new way of addressing pigmentation and attacking it on all sides in a safe and effective way. And combined, of course, with a sunblock, which is very important, isn't it, when we're treating pigmentation, to combine with a full sunblock.
Even if it's hormonally induced, such as melasma, where women who are pregnant or on birth control pills often experience, we now know you must have the component of UV exposure. So even though you might say, well, I have hormonally induced pigmentation, you won't get that pigmentation unless you combine those hormones with UV exposure. So the sunscreen is the most effective and the most critical aspect in any regimen to control hyperpigmentation on the skin.
In your research, are there certain forms of pigmentation you've found it's more difficult to address and get a result? What's the best results we get? On what kind of pigmentation are we seeing the best results?
The easiest one to treat is sun exposure. From years and years, it's cumulative. All of a sudden,
I've had great results, because without even realizing it, you're in daylight. Even if it's a cloudy day, you're still getting UV light.
And you know, I mean, I have to say, being born and raised in Los Angeles, I was a sun worshiper. It's not, you know, the sun exposure I had last weekend that causes the pigmentation. It's the, 50 years of sun exposure that it's cumulative.